So I'm Martin from Jisc. I'm going to talk to you today about an initiative of ours called Intelligent Campus. I'll say a little bit about how we think that some of the things that you guys are doing around smart cards, smart campuses and the infrastructure that supports them maybe can be part of a little bit of a holistic approach to improving the student experience, improving student outcomes, and not necessarily just about efficiency and those kind of traditional key drivers. So that's me. I'm on social media. If any of you are, do feel free to follow me. I'm at Martin on Twitter. You'll also see hashtag Intelligent Campus. There's quite a few workshops we've been doing around the country on this. There's some quite interesting discussions that you might want to tap into. But without further ado, I'm going to split my thing into three bits. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things. I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and why that could be relevant to us. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about where that might lead us. So that's my three bits. I've got roughly half an hour to do it. But if you think, hang on a minute, he's talking nonsense. What does he even mean by that? Do feel free to stop me and say, whoa, hold on a minute. And I'll try and expand or clarify. So if you've not come across us before, we're Jisc, we're the people that run the Janet network, so we're the kind of internet plumbers for universities and colleges. We also connect nearly half of the schools in the UK. So if your thing is around research and education, we've got a lot of cable in the ground, frankly. We have a long-term lease on dark fibre cable, and we built the infrastructure on top of that. So we're internet plumbers in quite a big way. But we do a whole range of services alongside that, and really where I'm headed with this talk today is about where some of that service development work is going. But some of you are probably familiar with EduRoam, maybe some of you use that every day. Some of you are probably on Jisc May mailing lists. And a whole bunch of those sorts of things serving, I had to pinch myself when I saw this number. It actually is serving about 18 million people, nearly all of them in the UK. But increasingly we're talking transnational education with institutions that are opening up branch campuses, partnerships overseas. So there's a very interesting conversation there. But that's where I'm coming from. My particular role at Jisc is I lead our Future and Emerging Technologies team. So we have the job of looking at, it's a hard life, we have the job of looking at all of the interesting new things that are coming along and saying, right, how can we help our members to use these, to understand these, and are there, from our perspective, any new kinds of products and services that we could offer around them. So I've got a couple here that we took to University Vice Chancellors. So this is last September, Universities UK annual conference. The lady over there is trying out augmented reality. This is Microsoft's HoloLens system. So that you project virtual stuff up on the real world with the only slightly cumbersome headset. It'll get smaller as well. That'll start to look a bit more fashionable. Give it a couple more years. They might manage to shrink it down to something that just looks like a big pair of sunglasses. And then you'd be walking around, maybe on an open day or something like that, you'd be walking around going, so that's what this building is. That's where the disco is for all the students on the open day. Right. And all that stuff will just magically appear in front of you. So that's one technology that we've been doing quite a bit of work with, helping some of our members to actually put augmented reality stuff into practice. So for instance, Leeds College of Music, they're actually using that technology to help people learn to operate a music studio. If you let people loose on a very expensive piece of equipment, sometimes they break it. So this is all about helping them to get up to speed so they can hit the ground running. This one is my personal favourite. That's one of my workmates, Suhad Al-Jondi, who's modelling the brain hat. So this really is, and it's quite cheap actually, it's about 250 quid. This is a consumer-grade EEG headset. It can literally read your mind. And not to the extent of knowing what you're thinking, but it can read your mind and it can show you, through this companion app, you can see a little bit of a brain scan there. You can use this to fly a drone. So when I started talking, it sounded a bit kind of sci-fi, but actually, you can buy this in shops, and it's good enough that you can fly a drone with it. So when we're talking about what impact could new technologies have on the core business of institutions, well, just picture you're a new lecturer, you're just learning to lecture. Someone puts you up in front of a room like this and says, right, just imagine it's 250 18-year-olds who aren't interested in you or what you're here for at all. How are you going to keep their interest? And actually being able to see what's going on inside your head is a very powerful way of understanding which bits of your brain you're using. We found we gave this to Vice Chancellors, so literally read the minds of most of the UK's university Vice Chancellors. We're keeping that data safe, just in case. It could be good for blackmail purposes. What we saw was, if you get people to exercise bits of their brain that they're not typically using, it really gives your brain an electrical workout. Those are electrical signals. So there's whole areas of your brain, like long-term memory. There's things that you might not be tapping into until someone says, maybe, can you translate this phrase into another language for me? And then, I've not really had to think about French, for example, or Italian, or whatever it is. So we think this is very interesting. We think there's lots of applications for it. And those sunglasses that I talked about here, this will shrink. This will shrink, and you might well find it's got a few of these EEG sensors in it. So, a few years from now, you'll just pop your smart sunglasses on, and in passing, they'll be reading your mind. And what we'll be able to do with that tech gets very interesting. But that's enough about where I'm coming from. I wanted to say a couple of words about the Internet of Things from our perspective, both as a major infrastructure provider and also kind of with a half an eye to the future. So I think what's very interesting right now is how venture capitalists essentially are just saying if it moves, put a chip in it, but actually it doesn't have to move. The simple fact that there's some chairs in this room, if you put a chip in each chair, well, you could say, okay, what is the typical occupancy rate? How long do people sit there for? How often do people get up and sit back down again? And we actually learn a lot about how the space is used. We learn a lot about people's activity patterns as well. Along the way, do we know who they are? Maybe, maybe not. And that's a particular question for you guys, is the extent to which the kind of data that we're talking about with sensors in gadgets is personal. Is it personal to me? Is it personal? Is it something that the institution feels ownership of? Does the institution want to know who sat in the chairs in its lecture theatres? Yeah, probably. It wants to know where to invest. But I like these two examples particularly. On the right, you've got Philips connected toothbrush. So this seemed like a complete boondoggle to me at first. I just thought, why would you put a chip in a toothbrush? And the truth is that the venture capitalists who are funding this stuff, they have no idea what is going to succeed. They're just throwing money at it to say, right, well, maybe chips and chairs will work. Well, let's try that. We'll fund half a dozen companies doing chips and chairs, see what happens. So similarly, let's stick a chip in a toothbrush. So I had to have a crown done a year or two ago, and that was quite painful, but it's also quite expensive. And I was really struck later on when I was reading about this, I was really struck that connected toothbrush is cheaper than my dental work. So what it does is it talks to an app on your phone and it says, you keep missing this bit around here, you need to work on that. If I'd known that, if I'd realised, I could actually have saved myself money. So this thing that looked like a complete boondoggle could have saved me money, and it could have saved me the trauma, the pain of having the dental work done. So I think that there are some cases where there are things like this which superficially seem quite irrelevant, silly even. Why on earth are they doing this? What possible value could this have? But sometimes when you pick away at them, there is a value and it starts to emerge. On the other hand, the happy fork, and I'm just singling this one out, I don't have anything against the people making the happy fork, Happy Labs. I think it's very interesting. But the happy fork, essentially it's all about you stab your food with a fork, you put the food in your mouth, maybe there's a bit of chewing, and the fork has some level of awareness of how often you're doing that. So maybe if you keep shoveling the food in, the fork knows, the fork will tell on you perhaps. But at least it will tell you in a notification that you're racing your food. Chew it more. Do it properly. Will that take off? Will you get a chip in every knife and fork? Slightly dubious about that. Maybe it is useful in some cases, as part of a therapy program, for instance. But I don't think you're going to come to a place like this and there's going to be a chip in every piece of cutlery on the table. But it's an interesting thought experiment. And I challenge you to do this after we've had the session today. Let's just look around you as you're on your way out of the building, as you're on your way home, and think, what about that? What if we put a chip in that? What if we put a chip in that? You may find there's some really quite interesting insights that come from doing that. There is a catch though, and this is me speaking as an infrastructure provider. A lot of what we do is cybersecurity. This is something called Showdown. Showdown is like a Google search engine for the things that people really shouldn't have connected to the internet. So you'll find all kinds of stuff, train signalling systems. Can you imagine that? People, CCTV cameras, you name it. People connect, often without realising they connect things to the internet. And then bad people find them. And bad people now have search engines. Bad people used to have to go and find them themselves. Bad people now just go here, which makes it a lot easier. And bad people sometimes launch automated attacks based on the information they get from here. So it's reduced the effort quite dramatically, which from a cybersecurity perspective is a little worrying. Not as worrying as if you were a French electric company which connected its hydroelectric turbines, its power stations, to the internet. So you might just be able to make out a little red button there. Actually, it's quite a big red button. And next to it is a green button. What do you think the red button does? Stops. What do you think the green button does? Stops. What do you think would happen if you just sat there and stop? It's a 58 kilowatt turbine. Probably there's lots of safeguards and safety measures, and you can't just switch it off because an "Are you sure?" prompt will pop up or something like that. Actually, you could just switch it off. You really could do that. So they connected it up to the internet. Somebody came in to do a bit of work. We need to connect this up to the network. They didn't join all the dots in their head. They certainly weren't well managed enough that they understood the implications of what they're doing. And so, yes, some people found that they could switch off the power station just by clicking on the button. It's just a website. If you know where to look, it's just a website. You just click on a button. So when we provide Janet to the community, one of the things that we're getting increasingly paranoid about is accidental versions of this. People don't mean to do this. The power company definitely didn't mean to do this, but sometimes it happens. So that's enough scaring you about the Internet of Things. I think there's some real interesting potential, and I hope I've kind of taken you a little bit out of the smart card comfort zone today. We're talking about that stuff. I'm going to take you further out of the comfort zone now and talk about artificial intelligence. If you're a purist, AI is a very overused term. There's a lot of things, basically AI as things that computers do that seem very clever, that we can't really understand how they do it, and it feels almost like things that people might do. What does that mean for us in education? Well, maybe it means things like this robot security guard. You can hire this robot security guard for, I think it's $5 an hour over in California, which is actually cheaper than the going rate for a human security guard. And that gave me real pause for thought. It's a bit like a toothbrush. You look at this and you think, well, that's slightly preposterous. Is it going to be as effective as a human security guard? If most of all, I'm concerned about my bottom line, or perhaps start to project an image of being very forward-looking, I might just give it a go. And if it's cheaper than having a person, there's no pension scheme, it can run as long as you want until its battery needs charging, different dynamic entirely, it doesn't need cups of tea, never needs a toilet break, kind of different dynamic entirely. Maybe I'll just give that a go. Being in America, of course, there are people who are trying to figure out how do we attach a an assault rifle to this thing or a taser. We need to weaponize it. I mean, come on, what use is it as just a robot that travels around and you can talk to it? But it's the kind of point. So the robot that you can talk to, the robot that's always on, traveling around the campus, you've got a question or you need some help. So, oh, excuse me. Quite a different dynamic, obviously, to having a human being there. I think we'll start to see these fairly soon. Maybe not this particular robot. There's quite a few other ones. Including robots made in the UK. So this one's made in Sheffield. And this is Sheffield University spin-out. And that's a STEM learning tool, but it's also a companion robot. So they built it initially to be a companion robot for people who maybe couldn't look after an actual pet anymore. Imagine that you've got really bad arthritis, you can't chase around after a puppy, even just bending down to feed it and clean up after it's quite a big deal. Or imagine you're autistic and a real live pet is just a bit too much for you. So that's what they created it for, and they realised it could be quite a nice STEM learning tool as well. So you can buy that as a kit. We tend to think things like this always come from America. They always come from Silicon Valley, or maybe they come from Shenzhen in China. This comes from Sheffield. This is a northern robot. I think this is a very powerful existence proof that we don't just have to sit and wait for other people to do things. We can do things too. Also, they're not very good with steps. You remember the old jokes about Doctor Who and Daleks? So this poor robot, it's a suicidal security guard robot, drowns itself by driving into pond. I think actually it just didn't realise there were steps there. So you will encounter people who are talking these up, and certainly those of you from university estates departments, you'll probably have someone trying to flog you a robot security guard soon. Do ask them how it copes with steps, because that is quite important. Some of the other things around AI that I think are really, really interesting, beyond that idea of, here's the thing I can converse with, like Amazon Alexa, I can have a chat with, or Siri. Got an app here called Duolingo, which works like a language coach, and you can just install this on your phone. It's just a free app. It uses artificial intelligence to figure out what you're strong at, what you're weak at, and then to reinforce and coach you to get better at the things you're not very good at. Will we see things like this teaching and learning? Absolutely. Is there a lifestyle bit to this as well? And some of you have already experimented with campus apps that try and nudge people into healthier lifestyles. Machine learning and artificial intelligence are the principal way that the computer industry is trying to do that kind of processing of aggregate information, finding patterns and trends. So you probably start to come across this, and it will become an avalanche, it will become a cavalcade, I think. I'm very interested in using AI to make things, so like artistic style transfer, you might see this in apps on your smartphone. When you pull up a filter, post that selfie, and say, do you want to use this style? I'll post it in the style of Picasso or Van Gogh or whatever, or just have, rabbit ears. And that's another application of AI. That's AI to create something that wasn't there before. Microsoft's taken this a level further, so you can actually give their AI a description, a text description of the thing that you wanted to create, and it will go off and make it. So it's made a little yellow bird sat on a twig. From nowhere, there was no bird. It's just learned over time what these words could usefully translate into. So will we see that kind of technology used for cheating? Yes, absolutely. It will be very interesting. If I can generate a picture of a bird sat on a twig, well, actually, maybe I can generate an essay. Actually, maybe I can generate something that's realistic-looking essay, because it's based on lots of essays that other people have submitted already. And this is where the technology might work. Let's see. Yeah, so this is adversarial AI. What these people have done is they've made some 3D printed objects that the AI misclassifies. So this is a turtle, right? Once a turtle, always a turtle. They've just tweaked the markings around a little bit. You probably can't read that. Rifle. The same AI now thinks that this is a rifle. And it's just a few subtle characteristics that don't really change. But now from every angle you view it, the AI thinks that it's a rifle. And my point about this is, particularly for those of us working in any kind of estates, facilities, like security context, is that we should assume that people will try and cheat the machine. We tend to be very trusting about technology. We tend to think that everybody is just going to be nice, but actually often people use technology maliciously, and they use it frankly to cheat. So this is, when I talk about cheating essays, this is my favourite right now. I just can't get over this. I don't know Shakespeare very well. So for me, this looks quite plausible. This is an AI that someone's trained with the complete works of William Shakespeare. So they just fed that in. Now you can say, okay, go off and generate me something that looks a bit Shakespearean. So it's there saying, oh, here's King Lear. Oh, if you're a feeble sight, the courtesy of your law, your sight and several breath will wear the gods. You think, wow, that's very powerful. I don't think it really means anything, but actually I can understand that just as well as I can understand a lot of the Shakespearean texts that I read as a student. So that, a Shakespearean scholar would say, cut off it, mate. But other people might look at that and think, yeah, okay, right, that's a bit more Shakespeare, yeah, okay. And I think that's the message for us, is that we have to be aware, increasingly aware, that people will use techniques and technologies like this to nefarious ends. We tend to think that everybody is nice. Technologists particularly tend to think that everybody is going to be nice. But sometimes people aren't. So I've led you down along the meandering path to this initiative that we call Intelligent Campus, which is where we're trying to join some of these dots. So we're trying to join the dot of Internet of Things, sensors and chips in all kinds of stuff, with artificial intelligence, so looking at pattern matching, classification, maybe at generating plans and predictions of stuff that should happen in the future. And what would that really look like? So here's a diagram from the University of Glasgow with the Future Cities Catapult. And what they've been trying to do is to treat the university as a machine, essentially. So at each stage of each of the things that the machine does, there's the opportunity to say, actually, right, okay, so here's a bit that we could get data from. Here's a bit that we could do some an amalgamation and analysis of that data with. So what happens from that so-called digital exhaust? Does that look like at a university? Well, it's a student comes onto campus, maybe they go through a barrier system. They're looking for a parking space. Maybe your multi-storey car park has IoT devices in the parking spaces, so you can tell which spaces are occupied, so you can put a sign up that says 52 spaces free. Maybe you know that they've come through there into the car park because you have ANPR. All of these things generate a record, and often we just throw the record away because, well, why was I keeping that anyway? There's been no disciplinary incidents reported. We should probably just throw that away. GDPR, we should throw that away. Might get us into trouble later. And what we're trying to explore is actually what happens when you join the dots, what happens when you connect the data from these disparate systems and services. So we've got quite a lot of work done already on learning analytics, which is all about supporting learners to achieve the best possible outcome, and it's about intervening. If it looks like someone's in trouble, if it looks like they might drop out, what's the point where we give their personal tutor a nudge and say, we want to give Fred a call? Fred's not been to lectures for 2 weeks. Fred's not been to the library at all this term. Fred spent their entire time down the bar, maybe. And there's some very interesting questions about consent and privacy there. And one of the big parts of this initiative for us has been to develop a code of conduct around the use of data and consent. So it was very interesting to hear about that from a GDPR perspective this morning. But we think this, which is principally right now, is about student-facing IT systems. It's about things like the library system, the virtual learning environment. We think it could be massively better if we start to put in things like building data. So for instance, You know, we're in a room here today, which is pretty good. You know, it's nicely lit. It's a good temperature. But everybody knows on their campus, you know, you may not have data to back it up, but you know that there are probably some spaces that aren't ideal for the purpose that they're being used for. And that does have, sometimes, profound impacts on people's learning and their attainment. And that's where we want to take the next step, is to say, okay, we've got about 24 universities and colleges who are using this now. We'd like to take the next step and start to fold in some of the facilities data so that we can ask those sorts of questions. So, you know, if there's a cohort that reliably does badly, could that actually be because they're in a room which is poorly lit, has very bad ventilation, CO2 levels are building up, and when CO2 gets over about 1,500 parts per million, you start to fall asleep or you get a headache. You know, really simple things like that that could be changed. So can we see the correlations, and then if we do some amendments and adjustments, can we see that there are actual differences in outcomes and attainment? So that's where we're at right now. We think you could probably push that a little bit further and end up at a point where, like the AI tutor I talked about before, actually learners are increasingly following a personalised path. So let's say we know from the data that you're struggling in a particular area. We're going to use an AI tutor. We can't do this with a human being because we don't have enough of them. But we can copy and paste the AI tutor. We can have as many of those as we want. Give you a little bit of a boost. But then you're in a minority of one. You're the only person doing your version of the course. So it makes things like evaluation and feedback very different. So we think that's where we go in the future, personalised and adaptive learning. Right now, today, we're very interested in having that conversation with people about folding in facilities data, linking it with the student activity data and institutional records, and seeing what we can construct with that. And I know from looking at the list that we have a few of our learning analytics pilot sites here today, so it's really good to have you here, and it would be nice to have a chat about it later on. What does it look like? Well, it looks like dashboards for the tutor, it looks like an app for the student. So we're talking about campus apps, and I think there's a very interesting question about how many apps can you manage, actually? Do you want to have that campus app? Is it okay if some products and services come with their own? And so we ended up developing our own app, which is called Study Goal. You can find it in the App Store. Study Goal works by students setting themselves goals, like I will go to the library twice a week, or read for 4 hours every week is the goal that students set themselves. And then they can see their progress, but they can also compare their progress against their peers. So that's the kind of stuff we've been doing, but it doesn't take into account yet that kind of physical environment stuff, the places that you go, the environment in the places that you go. We think that there are a lot of sources. So there's mapping wayfinding, there's attendance information. Many of you use smart cards for attendance monitoring. Can we do something there to join that data up? And then it kind of goes all the way over to space utilization and energy consumption. If we can find out by joining the dots on the data what would help students to have better learning outcomes, there's no reason why we can't also use that to help inform space planning decisions about buildings being refurbished, and energy costs for things like heating and lighting. So I'm going to shut up now and take any questions that you've got. I just want to close on these summarising bullet points. So we've been doing that learning analytics thing for a couple of years now. We've got 24 sites signed up to that already. We've got room for more, and we're piloting it with a whole bunch of people. I'm going to launch that in production this autumn, and I'd love to talk to you about that. We're starting to look at that intelligent campus question. What happens if you pull in environmental data? And again, we'd love to talk to people about potentially piloting or being a vendor that interoperates with this. Because this stuff isn't us going off and building things in a vacuum. It's us linking to existing products that are out there. and giving people a procurement route forward. And working with a company founded by Professor Stephen Apple, who's an expert on learning design, learning space design, it's actually building a hardware sensor. So this thing you can see in the picture here, the monitor, embeds sensors for, it's got 8 key environmental stats. So I think it'd be quite interesting to get a bunch of learn monitors out to institutions and say, well, actually, what changes might you make as a result of having the information that maybe you didn't have before. And we're doing a hackathon. So we've got students always have ideas fizzing and bubbling out of their brains. Let's see what kind of ideas students have about how some of these data sources can be joined up. So those of you who are from institutions or have dealings with institutions, this link here is how to get involved. We're doing a week's hackathon, residential, in Birmingham in August, and we're looking for student teams that want to take part. There are prizes. And I'll shut up now, but here's a bonus slide. Yeah, that's the info on the hackathon, but I'll let you scrape that from the slide there. And those are my details. So thank you so much for having me today. Happy to take any questions.
Martin, first of all, thank you very much.